Cole's accomplishment is one of the biggest underdog stories in the sport's history, a down-on-his-luck short tracker winning the big-ticket race at Daytona. Nonetheless a controversial figure, some say he doesn't deserve his career-topping victory, since it was likely cheated up to make the distance. That's a question perhaps for the officials on the weight scales, but there is no question that he's an incredible driver. This is the story of determination, hard-headedness, and success. This is the story of Cole Trickle. Before we begin, however, a quick word from our sponsor.
Mellow yellow, there's nothing mellow about high and thirsty cold. Citrus taste cut through when nothing else will do.
Watch the mellow yellow car burn up the track in this summer's hottest movie, Days of Thunder.
There's nothing mellow about it.
Win a version of the Mellow Yellow Days of Thunder Lumina. Register at Barrett Chevrolet and listen to KQRS for details.
Cole was born on July 2nd, 1962, in Eagle Rock, California. The Californian hotshot hails from an open-wheel background, mostly that of sprint cars. He started out racing dirt midgets, but quickly found his footing. He'd been offered a part-time ride in sprint cars, and he'd win the World of Outlaws Rookie of the Year in 1986. He'd even managed to finish 7th in points, but the margin of victory was only 12 ahead of the second-place driver in the Rookie of the Year battle. He attempted to make a few ASA starts, sharing the field with the likes of Dick Trickle and other series legends like Mike Eddy, but more often than not, he'd find the outside wall than even the inside at the top 10. He'd make his return to sprint cars in 1986, nabbing his first ever championship. He'd immediately follow that up with another championship the next year. Coming from a broken home, this meant having a rather uncertain financial repository to draw from. Thankfully, he'd have backing from STP to make ends meet. 1988 would see him experience some classic championship hangover, where he'd struggle to finish better than 5th in feature races. He'd close the season with a 7th-place finish, just behind Andy Hillenberg. 1989 would see him bounce back in a big way, with 7 straight wins between the 3rd race at Port Royal all the way to I-70 Speedway. At the season-ending race at Lernerville, he'd finish 4th, and end the year out 5th in points. Exploring other options, he figured the next natural step was IndyCar. After all, he was used to all-out speed, and all he needed was equipment to match his abilities, even if he wasn't an Andretti or an Unser. Cole's father allegedly had initially flubbed the deal after getting involved with fraudulent stocks and bonds, and even a yacht sale scandal. Fortunately, he'd catch his biggest break yet. Tim Dayland, a Chevrolet dealership owner in downtown Charlotte, planned on forming a Winston Cup Series team. Cole would be his first phone call. Tim would be impressed by his race stats, and felt that even though he had very limited experience in stock cars, and only getting a vague education from the sport via ESPN coverage, he would be more than adequate to be his mainstay driver. Besides, a stock car is a stock car. They're all about the same, as far as the rulebook would say anyhow. To help steer him in the right direction, Tim would hire Harry Hogg, the famous crew chief with a knack for innovating race cars. However, he was also infamous for being blamed for the death of Buddy Bretherton. According to the newspaper Winston Cup Scene, it was alleged that the internal investigation by NASCAR had discovered that Buddy had been knocked unconscious from carbon monoxide poisoning and due to thin-wall tubing and bodywork of the car. In turn, he would lose control of the car at high speeds, and after hitting the retaining wall at Michigan, this would kill him instantly. Tim had managed to sell the sanctioning body on letting bygones be bygones. After all, he was one hell of a salesman. Preseason testing would begin. After the impressive test session, Harry would agree to put together a car for him. Cole would drive the number 46 City Chevrolet Chevy Lumina. As impressive as that session might have been, perhaps Harry shouldn't have been so quick to throw on innovations just yet, as the early half of the season would prove to be nothing but dismal. This would put him a distant 14th in points. Before the Darlington race, the qualifying effort had panicked Tim. He was already at risk of losing everything, including his dealership, given the sunken cost of the race effort. Harry was encouraged to leave no stone unturned. Cole overheard this and reassured Harry that he was doing an excellent job and that the car was perfect. Darlington was very much a driver's track. Many underdogs had found victory lane here. Perhaps this is what gave Cole the confidence. That or sheer overconfidence, who can say? Despite this, the car would come into its own early on in the stint, and on occasion even able to make passes on the outside in turns 2 and 3. Harry would remind him that turn 4, however, was not the place to make such a move. With 10 laps to go in the race, Cole is now riding behind Rowdy Burns, giving him a few bumper tags. After all, Robin's racing. An overzealous bump and run sends Rowdy spinning and throwing out the yellow. Rowdy would cook his tires in the proceedings but would recover. He finally pulled it off, the rookie sensation's first ever Winston Cup win. This put his own self-doubts to bed, and Tim could rest easy knowing that the team would be able to finish out the rest of the year and continue in the series for the foreseeable future. And no longer would he have to run out of pocket. Now with the big money deal from Exxon promoting their new line of Superflow motor oils, the green and yellow City Chevrolet paint scheme would be swapped for that of the pink and white that is now famous to this very day. The sponsorship deal paid off for Exxon and Tim, with Cole managing to win the next few races. Whilst he did sport new colors, old habits still reappeared going to the July race. This incident would leave him hospitalized for quite some time. In the interim, another short tracker, Russ Wheeler, would take the driver's seat. Russ had also raced on dirt before he ever raced on paved ovals, but unlike Cole, was a dirt late model driver. Aside from being a 3-time Knoxville track champ, he was known for getting into a litany of fights and controversies himself. Port Royal Speedway actually banned him outright from competition, as did Williams Grove on those grounds. In one interview, Russ was asked about his future prospects in the Cup Series. "I'm more than happy to be a part," he said. "But what I don't understand is why teams are so big now. Some are even 3 cars per team. It's idiotic. It should be every man for himself, not a team. How do you divvy up the winnings then? Do I get half the All-Star race money if I push him to the finish line? How about the Winston Noble million? Do I only get half if I push him across the finish line first? It doesn't make a lick of sense. That's not racing. That's stupidity and money grabbing. Let there be 1 seat for 1 team and 1 seat only." Tim, however, either didn't know this or was willfully ignorant. He had courted additional sponsorship to form a 2-car operation. Hardee's Restaurants would back Russ in the number 18 Chevy Lumina for the rest of the season. Whilst Russ would take the deal, he was still not happy about giving race room for the sake of being a teammate. To him, it's a spot that's not being occupied by him. Furthermore, according to Tim Dayland, in private, Russ had a bone to pick with Cole's attitude, since he was an outsider to the sport. He felt he was ruining the status of NASCAR racing. "This isn't Formula One," he said. "This isn't the place for Hollywood types. They can go back the way they came." To the surprise of, well, absolutely nobody except him apparently, this went about as well as expected. The race at Atlanta would see Cole lose a motor after being chased down by Russ, and the following weekend would see an outright attack on the rookie. This would leave Cole without a ride for the time being. Russ Wheeler would not be in a much better position, however. In an article follow-up from Winston Cup scene, Tim Dayland was furious at Russ being disallowed to participate in the next 2 race weekends. The reply, however, was simple. "You're not doing yourself any favors," said Bill France. "You can best count your lucky stars he's not out shoveling shit in Iowa. If you can't control your drivers any better than this, then maybe you should go back to selling cars." An agreement was settled on a 146-point deduction for Russ, dropping him down to 5th in standings. It was still possible to win the championship, but it wouldn't be as straightforward as it once appeared. Russ would finish out the season a 4th in points. In the meantime, Cole would discover that Rowdy had been missing out on medical checkups. After convincing him to go to a hospital, Rowdy discovers that he needs to go under the knife for a broken blood vessel in his brain. Cole convinces him that he should do it anyway, as he would also undergo the risky surgery himself if that came to be. Rowdy reveals that he had received a sponsorship from Mellow Yellow, but he decided to put the money on the car and not him, as they weren't sure if he'd recover from surgery. Cole initially declines, saying that he shouldn't be asking him, but instead looking at much more capable drivers to take his seat. Rowdy was incensed, saying that it wasn't asking Cole, but telling him. The car just needed to finish at least in the top 5. He needed this more than anything. He needed this to look after his family. During Speed Weeks, the surprise announcement made everyone but Russ happy. Cole would take the seat of the number 51 Mellow Yellow Chevrolet. Despite qualifying well, and in the twin 125s, Cole would be relegated to move further back into the field due to an engine change. Harry had found metal in the oil pan and in the oil filter, requiring an engine swap. One of the conspiracies surrounding this was that he had swapped the motor in order to swap in a motor that wouldn't have been 100% legal otherwise. Post-race tech inspection never found any foul play despite this claim. Today, Cole Trickle is a 3-time Winston Cup champion across his 8 years of competition. a mentor to many, and inspiration to even more. Rowdy Burns retired after recovering in hospital, claiming it was a sign to quit. "I already got my trophies," he said. "I've got nothing left to prove. I get to stick around with my kids now, hang on the lake, ride the pontoon if I want. It's funny," he continued. "I started racing so I wouldn't have to work on the farm no more. Now I've raced, and all I want to do is hang out on the farm." Cole, meanwhile, would make a very brief return to sprint cars in 2021 on April 1st at the Bristol Dirt Race, where he almost broke the track record. Today, he runs a sprint car team and races part-time, planning a full-time schedule next year. He hired Paul Hogg as both his crew chief and part team owner. "I didn't hesitate when Cole asked if I could help run a sprint car team," he said. "I think it's awesome that I get to follow my uncle's footsteps and be the reason that Cole's fast." He's taken his return to sprint car racing very seriously and giving us everything we need to make sure we're competitive out of the box. I just hope I won't have to tell him to hit the pace car.
And from the movie Days of Thunder come the Thunder Racers from Hardee's. Only 99 cents each with any purchase. Collect all 4. And collect Days of Thunder cups with any 32-ounce drink. They're available for a limited time only. Capture the thunder at Hardee's.